Wireless Signals present a Bon Mott's Halloween series celebrating 6 decades of horror
To perform an autopsy first.
with in-depth analysis,
That's much too vulgar display of power.
adult content,
I did hurt him once, okay?
adult language,
You gotta come work for me.
and spoilers.
Mrs. French's cat is missing.
Join us.
All you can do is pass it along to someone else.
And as a finale to MOTS-O-Ween, this Saturday we will be doing a live review Halloween, the movie, at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our YouTube channel. So please come join us.
Welcome back to our penultimate episode of the MOTS-O-Ween Mashup Madness 2010. Today, we have just watched the last horror movie in our decade exploration, starting with the 60s. This has been the 2010s now.
Is it the tens? Like, is it the teens?
Whatever, man. Like,
I call it the teensies.
nah, no, don't call it that. Only Steve-O calls it
We're
that.
all calling it that now.
No, just him. Well, this movie was, we chose It Follows, which came out in 2014. It was supposed to be a fairly hyped up, decently well done modern horror movie, and we're about to discuss it, why or why not it may have indeed been that. So, who would like to give the overall synopsis of what the plot of It Follows is?
I will. A naive young woman has sex and gets a supernatural STD that slowly follows her around, and her gang of scrappy companions attempt to figure out how to stop it from following.
Otherwise known as Scooby-Doo in the case of the supernatural succubus film version.
Yep.
Exactly. So, since you've just given us that, Ian, you can speak about the intro itself at length.
I think there's kind of a prologue and a main introduction.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, very much like a horror movie style, you have an initial victim that you don't really get a sense of, like,
Her
you get a sense that
characterization
she's
is
being-
victim.
Yeah, she's being pursued by something. It's kind of like her actions are kind of strange, and you don't find this out till later, but it's invisible. Like, it that follows is invisible to everyone but the victim and previous
Victims
people
of
who've
it.
been cursed.
Yeah.
So she's running away from, like, something that's invisible to us, so we don't understand her actions. She ends up at the beach and gets murdered in a pretty gruesome style.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the prologue, and I may count that as the full introduction, but I think that when they start introducing all of the main players of this movie, and I would say it ends when she actually gets cursed. I think that's the good
Cutoff
point for when the introduction is. She ends up going out, the main character, Jamie, ends up going out on a date with this guy she's into. They end up having sex in his car, and he ends up chloroforming her in what I thought was the opposite. Like, he was confused about date rape for a second.
He didn't read the date rape manual.
And then she ends up waking up in a thing tied to a wheelchair, while he explains to her that he just gave her an STD.
The rules of the supernatural STD.
Yes. And it starts following her. So, I don't know. It actually was kind of intriguing to begin with. Like, I kind of bought in with the premise. And it was, like, really... Going to, like, to kind of the style for a second, it kind of had a very Twin Peaks-ish, soundtrack and feel.
Agreed.
Like, they kind of... how they introduced Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks.
Yes.
It had, like, Jamie had that kind of feel to her.
Sure.
And like waking up bound to a wheelchair, I was as confused as she was, and I thought it was a very interesting way to open the movie.
Fair enough. Well, I agree, of course, that there's two sort of openings: the prologue, the cold open murder victim of the setup of the whole horror movie, which I thought was well done. It was a nice sort of. I almost took it as I know they probably didn't intend it as such, but it was almost Jaws-like, because it was on the beach and so forth, and it was like her her body was all contorted. I think her leg was like broken off and like bloody and hanging there as a stump. And that was all like a nice, perfectly fine horror setup. And I also agree that the actual, like when I get into the main character, Jamie's character, I just want to say though, it was funny. Like I agree with you again, it was all fine setup, but Jeff, the guy who is explaining, like, I just gave you supernatural STD, he's all very kind of nonchalant, or at least matter of fact about it, and it's sort of like, it's almost rushed at you, like, hey, by the way, here's the rules, this, that, and the other thing, don't do this, and see you, bye. Like,
yeah, but actually
I thought that was fine for it, yes.
They made the point of why he would do that.
Yeah,
because
like I said, yeah.
I get the sense that this isn't the first girl he passed this on to, and the premise is that you pass on this ghost, or demon, or whatever it is.
Fuck it is.
If it kills the person you pass it on to, it
goes
starts
right
coming
back
after
to
you again. So, yeah, he tied her down. It's pretty extreme, but it's like, hey, this is what's happening. We're going to wait until this thing shows up so I can point it out to you. Don't die, because then it's coming after me. So he was laying it out like again,
manically, yes, but
it's a very utilitarian. Like he, in a sense, he was the smartest individual in this movie about how to survive this thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but and also I feel like he kind of had to figure out through trial and error, because he said that when he got it, it was a one night stand, and he never saw her again. So like, he had to figure all this stuff out by himself, and then he just wanted. I guess he just wanted her to know, he wasn't a complete monster, but.
The real monster is the ghost, but honestly, I'm kind of a dick as well.
About the intro, I liked the prologue part of it. I thought that was, or at least that was intriguing to me, more so than the introduction to all the characters.
Right.
Like, it just seemed it seemed like it was supposed to be character building, but I didn't get a great...
They have to have characters to build them.
Right, I didn't get a great sense of who any of them really were, and, like... That whole scene, I don't know if I count the whole scene where he is explaining everything to her as part of the introduction. I feel like that might be like starting to get into the body. Like maybe when she goes out cold, I think that's kind of the end of my introduction.
So it's wrapping up as the cloth is being pressed to her face.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe.
But honestly, I was kind of confused, and I did want to know what was going on, but I didn't think it was like extremely well done. And then, I'll talk about that part where he's exposition dumps everything onto her in the body, but I don't know if that was super effective either. Or I think it could have been done in a better way.
But I think contextually it does make sense. Like, yes, there could have been better ways, but I didn't feel that it was a unnecessary exposition dump.
Right.
Yeah, he's in a rush to dump a bunch of exposition on her. Like, that's literally his intent to doing this.
Sure, and like, just real quickly, we'll speak about this when a question comes up. But yeah, they're stock characters, so like, they're the stock horror characters. That's what their characterizations are. Her friend sitting around in the, it's you've seen that 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Also, this movie had to deal with the fact that it was introducing an entire set of rules.
Right.
So it's not like a generic horror movie in the sense that we know what we're getting into and that there's established rules to these monsters. Like, someone had to lay out
what was happening exactly.
Yeah, as not to confuse.
But through Radio Magic, I can say that earlier this week, in fact, yesterday, we talked about a movie that did this a lot better, that explained the rules as it was going on, and everything kind of unfolded. But when I'm talking about Pontypool, which came out yesterday, to anyone who's listening to this, it unfolded the rules as the movie was unfolding itself. It didn't just dump all the rules into your lap. And that was another film that had its own huge new set of rules for how things worked. And I thought that did a better job of getting those to you.
Sure, I totally see your point. Yes, but I just don't think it was pulled off as poorly as you may think in the body of It Follows.
I think there are bigger things to complain about in the body, but
that's true.
All right. Well, the introduction. I'm sorry. So let's give our scores about the intro.
I think it was a fine introduction. I was invested in the movie to begin with. Yeah, I agree that, especially like the family and the friends, very confusing who was related to who and why all these people were there. But that was kind of secondary to the theme of being a horror movie. I thought it was effective, so I'm giving it a 1.
All right.
I am going to give this a incredibly soft 1 because like I said, I did like the intro or the prologue, if you will.
The cold murder open, as I said. The cold killing, if you will.
I like that part. It got me into it. It didn't like lay everything in your lap. And you got the idea that something was following her, if you didn't get that from the title.
It was. Yeah.
And you got the idea that you couldn't see it, and you got the idea that it killed the shit out of her in a gruesome way. And that's basically all you need in that type of open.
Fair enough.
Like I said, I wasn't as big a fan as the rest of the intro, but for that I'll give it a 1.
All right. Well, I also give it a 1. I thought it was all very well pulled off, both prologue and actual main plot arc introduction. Let's move on now to the body of It Follows. Sivo, give us your thoughts.
All right. So the body, if we're picking it up from where he heard, was it Jeff?
Yeah.
Is explaining all the rules to her. As far as that went, he did a good job of explaining all the rules to her and making sure that she knew exactly what she had to do. Granted, he did it in a horrible way, and that really screwed her up for the rest of the film. She spends the rest of the movie seeing this thing following her and trying to get away from it, and at one point during the body, I would say, because I think the other point is at the climax, passing it off to somebody else and kind of just seeing if that works. Which, spoiler, it does not. So the rules, which I guess we should kind of explain really quickly, are that you have to have, if you have sex with someone, the thing that's following will stop following you and start following that person. But if that person dies,
if it kills that
it'll
person,
go back. If the person that you pass it on to dies or is killed by it, it'll go back to you. And that's pretty much, and it just walks after you no matter where you go. So I feel like there are a lot of ways they could have gotten out of this, specifically because this thing just walks after you at the same speed no matter what, all the time.
Well, he did say, he's like, you can drive far away and buy yourself a lot of time, blah, 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 but it's going to keep walking after you, like, relentlessly. And it also established, like, if not outright at Jeff's exposition dump, later on, like, it can't open doors. It can affect some things in the physical world and be affected by them.
Right.
But he said something like, make sure you're always in a place with at least 2 exits and entrances.
As Ian was saying, well, it can break doors, we saw.
Right. And windows.
But as Ian was saying, which I was actually thinking at the same exact time and didn't say out loud, it seemed to go for the path of least resistance to get into a place.
Sure,
so
yeah.
if there's a door that it has to get through, it'll break through the door. But if there's a window that's easier for it to get through, then it'll go through that way.
Fair enough. And he said something like, what else? Jeff said something like that.
It's not dumb.
Not stupid, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that I feel that it doesn't want to draw attention to, like, the fact that it's going after a victim. So, like, breaking a door, we saw when it actually has to break a door, it causes a mass destruction. So if you're trying to hunt someone in the suburbs, like, breaking a window and climbing through is a more effective means of entrance.
I think they also had one other rule.
You mentioned that it hides in, like, crowds to try and get close to you and things like that.
It can appear as, like, various people, loved ones, or a stranger. Like, you're not really you. It could be either one. It's sort of a chameleon, I guess, in that. And there was one other rule about you guys remember what it was? It was something like, and only, of course, if you can only see it if you're infected. So, like, a large
or if you've ever been infected.
Yeah, exactly. So a large part of the movie, like, her friends couldn't see it, so that was part of the rules. They can interact with it, they just can't see where it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Since we're discussing the rules here for a moment, I think this is a good point to one of the again, I'm overanalyzing. Maybe perhaps I shouldn't, but yeah, I give this movie credit for coming up with something new.
A clever idea, at least.
But throughout, like, the movie, I was thinking about how many poor decisions the characters made.
So bad.
Yes.
And not only, like, the traditional horror movie kind of poor decisions.
Yeah.
But, like, no one was thinking outside the box.
Poor ones given the circumstances of the rules.
So, I feel... All right. I might go off on a little bit of a rant here, so bear with me. But
Dennis Miller?
I don't go off on a rant here, but there were so many ways to escape this thing. Why even try to, like, kill it? First of all, I guess she probably didn't have the option of just getting on a plane and moving away or whatever. But if you go across the fucking ocean, it has to walk after you. It'll be forever before it gets there. And you can watch this thing coming at you for an extended period of time, you can figure out how fast it walks and figure out how long it'll take to get places.
Steve wouldn't stop harping on, just measure the walking speed, dudes. Like, that's true throughout the movie.
Like,
fair enough, go on.
It doesn't change its rate of walking at all, ever, apparently. You can just figure out how long it'll take to get somewhere. You drive 100 miles away, and then you drive back to where you were, and you do that every 3 days, you'll be fine.
Well, I also, since you got on a rant and we started with the rules of this, we indeed discussed a bit during the movie how you could get around it, and we brought up a number of interesting propositions, not all of which I want to mention on air, just that, as Ian said, they were thinking outside the box, whereas the characters were not.
Yeah, and there's like there's so many questions like is it on the details of how this is transmitted? Yes. Like what kind of acts pass this along? Who's potential victims? Like is there like kind of like recursion that could happen?
Yeah, exactly. The science of the supernatural succubus you're trying to figure out.
Again, maybe we're overthinking
based
this
on the
movie.
rules they gave us.
We are overthinking this movie.
Always, of course, but
like it's constantly distracting when I'm thinking of like, oh, what could be other ways of like dealing with this?
Maybe.
Honestly, if you could find like a group of people that had this thing and you could make it recurse back on itself, you could just set up a network where you drive 100 miles away to the next person, you have sex with them, and then you go back home. And then they drive like a week later,
the traveling salesman
or like
problem.
you drive 300 miles away, have sex with them. Then a week later, they drive 100 miles away and have sex with somebody else. It'll be a year before it gets back to you. You just go around this circle,
as long as they
and you have to go have sex
survive.
with this person once a year. Like, easy way to get around it.
That's one of the more family-friendly solutions we thought of. But yeah, no, of course, like that's a funny like aspect of it. And yeah, we spent some time chuckling to ourselves and coming up with like funny things about it.
But this was.
But the truth didn't. In a legitimate part of it didn't address some of that, or like it was left to fill in the blanks for you. So it made it like unclear about the actual rules of this monster.
And I take that I have to hold that against. The movie, that I was not paying attention to the movie, but paying attention to loopholes in this system they set up.
I completely agree. And notwithstanding all of that, there is also the fact that she went into as many rooms with no exits as she could possibly find in this film. She went to the door. She went to the guy's house as he was about to be murdered by a thing.
She crawled slowly to the hole
crawled slowly to several things that it was in.
Well, she made horror movie moves, as you said earlier.
But I'm much more willing to forgive those elements than I am the fact that like
it was iffy on the rules.
Like we were talking about like, oh, what about this? What about this? What if they did this? And that is breaking incredible amount of immersion throughout this entire.
That's a really good point because that may sway what I'm going to ultimately rate it. The thing is, I think I was, even though yes we were doing that, we were MSTKing the fucking rules of the sexual monster, but overall I still think I was engaged enough with the movie.
Well, speaking of engagement though, actually to get back to what happens during the body. They end up meeting this like stoner guy across the street who looks quite a bit like John Bender from
Breakfast Club. It was clear that they were like knew each other from childhood. Yeah. He had been their their neighbor their whole lives.
So like he's actually he's pretty competent throughout this. Like they go to a seaside cottage that like I think his father
is upstate or whatever. He said something about it.
Until he gets the disease.
And I thought all of that, like everything up till that point was very engaging. And she ends up, like, the creature ends up coming, she tries to shoot it, and actually ends up shooting in the neck.
She scores a shot on it, yeah.
But it gets back up, she ends up stealing the guy's car, or the stoner's car, and crashing it, and she ends up in the hospital. And I feel that at this point, the movie starts
to lose you a bit. Yeah, all right, you're right. At that point, like, it was almost over the line. Like, it was approaching it, but again, to me, I think it bent, I guess I want to say, but it held together throughout. That was the weakest point in it. I agree with that for sure. But I think overall it held my attention more often than not. It was engaging, given the premise and given the rules that they didn't lay out for us.
And yeah, you could have seen coming from a mile away that the stoner was going to sleep with her, and then he like slept with another girl, and he thought he was like safe, and he was doubting that this creature existed at all throughout most of the film, even though one of her friends, a nerdy kid, ends up having like huge scars across his chest from
being raped by the ghost.
Yeah, and also hit the air with a chair.
Yes.
And shattered.
Well, he was taking a piss when all that happened. So
but I think he saw that part, but he didn't see the thing break the door.
All right, well maybe,
but nonetheless, like this movie is incredibly cliched, and his arc at the end was even more so. like his character was doomed to die.
Yeah, well, that's more characters than body, but
Yeah,
it
but
filters into it. Yeah.
but narratively, it created all these rules for this ghost, and then played the genre
Perfectly straight.
Directly into the ghost's hands,
Sure,
or whatever,
fair
the
enough.
succubus's hands.
I do see what you mean. I just don't know if it's enough for me to like give it negative credit on that front.
It's hard to have made worse decisions in this movie for any of the characters, and like I find it hard. I often don't like horror movies because of that exact thing.
Fair enough.
Anyone with any sense would have made very different decisions than these characters made.
I'm kind of delaying this topic a little bit because I really don't know how I'm going to score much of this movie yet. Because how do I view this movie? Am I viewing it through the intention of the director? Because I feel that this was very much a throwback to like 80s horror movies.
I agree with that to a large extent.
The actors play very 80s stereotypical roles. There's
Down to the jean jackets.
Yes. The themes are very much like a kind of a subversion on like the 80s Friday the 13th
We'll
movies.
speak about themes soon enough.
But like I'm talking about
sure.
how to view
It as a whole. Yes.
So narratively, this movie's body was an 80s horror movie, but it was effective to that point. But I didn't. Should I view it as what it's trying to be, or should I view it in the scope of like what I expect from horror today?
That's fair enough. Like it's depending on which way you view it, it's depending on affect your score. And
I think perhaps you have to look at it at what it actually accomplished in your mind. Did you think that it effectively pulled off the homage to 80s horror movies, or do you think that it kind of fell short of the best 80s horror movies and the way that they did the body of their stories?
Oddly enough, both, because I thought it was effective. It was effective homage, but it didn't capture the best of.
Yeah, and I think you're saying therein lies the problem because it sort of touched upon both of those aspects at once. It's hard to judge. You're saying it depends which one you give more credence to than not, I suppose.
Well, the way that I look at it, I think it was an obvious homage. I think that was very obvious that they were homaging these old horror movies, these old, like, I guess Friday the 13th type movies. But I mean, was the body of this narrative substantial enough to make it? I don't know. I think it plays off of a lot of like the tug and pull between baser tendencies of human beings, and it tries to do that a lot. But I don't know what it really said about that, or like if it said anything
beyond that
substantive about it.
I mean, yeah, I guess I see your point, but I think to me it comes down to something you said.
I guess that's themes, though. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine, but it all filters into it because it's an important distinction we just laid out, and it's an interesting one to try to think about and divide up. But at the end of the day, for me, I think the question becomes: was it a good enough homage? Even though, given that yes, they played it straight here and there, and it maybe was not as creatively done as it could have been. I think overall it held together enough for me to give it credit on the body.
I saw somewhat recently the remake of Last House on the Left, which kind of had a similar throwback vibe to it, and I felt that this probably pulled it off better.
Okay.
So
maybe
I'm jumping the gun with the score here, but I think we're ready. I'm going to give it a soft 1 because I think it is better more often than not.
That's pretty much exactly how I would phrase it, and that's why I'm going to give it, yes, a softerish 1, but nevertheless a 1 at the end of the day.
I'm going to give it a 0. There was a lot of stuff that I just couldn't get over that happened throughout the body of this. That
I can completely see that.
Yeah. All right, so let's go on to conclusion, and I can start on that. I think the conclusion probably starts when they have a plan so the whole group, Scooby-Doo's gang, gets together, and they've figured out that at this point that they can hurt it, like they can shoot it and hit it with other things and other objects in the world. So they go to their childhood hangout place, I guess, in old downtown, burnt out the city part of the
Detroit,
wherever they live.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever said that, but
they said 8 Mile.
Yeah.
We met.
I assume that means Detroit. I don't know any other city that has an 8 Mile.
So they went down to an abandoned YMCA, I guess, someplace with a pool, and their plan was to wait there and lure it in there and electrocute it. I guess they plugged in a whole bunch of appliances, they're waiting for it, and Jamie got in the pool. It showed up eventually, and they're like frantically trying to fight it. It starts throwing the appliances at her, so I guess it's unplugging them, so she's not electrocuted herself.
So does that mean that it is afraid of being electrocuted? I was thinking about this during the movie, right?
No, I think it's afraid of water.
Can't go in water, maybe it can't
It
cross
goes
water.
into the water, though.
Yeah, but
No.
but that ends up being its like downfall.
It's
By
undoing.
entering and it only goes in the water because it gets shot in the head.
That's true. So, I mean, I guess you can look at it either way because it starts unplugging and throwing the items that are littered around the pool at her.
Unplugging, I think, is too strong a word because it's just lifting up items.
Yeah, it's
and
not.
then
They come
while
unplugged.
throwing
It's not
That's true.
consciously unplugging them, or maybe it is. Like, it's not really because it's set up that it's quote unquote not stupid, even though it can't turn a doorknob. At the beginning,
No, it turns. It just can't get it. Go on.
I can't unlock the door.
Yeah.
maybe. But
Demonic
anyway,
rules.
because it starts like throwing these things in, does that mean that it is scared to get in the water and go after her? Does it mean that it knows it's being trapped? I assume it means it knows it's
No,
being
I
trapped.
think it's scared to get into because I'm going to give this movie credit, or maybe undeserved, but it's in a lot of literature, like in the old fairy tale kind of things, like in vampiric ones, like
Can't cross
some
water.
demons can't cross flowing water.
It's
So-
true.
And
Or like the threshold of a doorway or
to
something,
that
things
point,
like
there's
that. But
a repeated motif. Like the opening called victim goes to the beach. They also retreat to the beach to try to fight it. She looks at the water a couple times. She drives to the beach herself. Like it's repeated like throughout. Like they show you shots of water, and I think it's implied somewhat. The more I think about it,
there's definitely this motif of water, and I would like to point out a couple interesting things. Actually, from the movie, I probably should have pointed this out in the body section. But in the beginning, she's in the pool. At the end, when she goes back home, the pool is broken and all the water is out of it.
That's true. That's a good point.
So I think that lends a little bit of credence to the fact that it's scared of water because it's destroying any like water sanctuaries that she might be going into.
Sure. All right. So given all that, the rest of
However, I would also like to point out that in the end, and that end scene, it starts throwing things at her, but the way that it killed John Bender earlier in the movie was by like fucking him to death. So if it throws this stuff at her and kills her in the middle of the pool, has it achieved its mission?
No,
or does it have to fuck her to death?
I think that it was intending to get her out of
Unconscious.
the pool.
Oh, that, yeah.
To like chase her out because it was like hitting, but it wasn't like, I don't know, from what I gathered by its power, it could have just smashed her head in with one of those things if it wanted to.
It does make her bleed in the first one that hits her.
Well, it's like
It's
a grazing
really-
cut. Yeah, like that's true. Like the thing is, they never laid out that exact rule in the movie itself. You're supposed to try to extract it from what they did lay out, and I don't know if you can.
So yeah, they don't really make that clear. I mean, it's something that could go either way. Obviously, like a lot of things in this film.
Sure. So, anyways, the rest of that is she's pointing at it. Jamie is like, "Here, it's over there. Go get it." And her nerdy friend Paul, they had a gun from before. They realize it can in fact be shot. So what got me is like they cover it with a sheet, which I thought was a nice little touch,
Yes.
like so everyone can see it now. And he goes up, point blank range, shoots it in the head. It falls into the pool.
I mean, he's from Detroit.
I guess, but
even before he throws the sheet over its head, and this is so completely an afterthought in the movie, he shoots her friend, or he shoots his friend,
Velma.
basically.
Basically,
Velma from...
accidentally, yes.
Yeah,
So what?
but like, nothing is really ever said about that. Nobody seems to give a
she
shit.
takes it like a
Yeah,
champ.
she got shot in the leg, and then she's in the hospital later. They dressed it's in the most briefest way possible. Yes,
Right,
though.
like it's such an afterthought in the film.
Yes, that's fine. That's true. So anyway, he shoots it in the head. Captain Paul Nerd, falls into the pool, and of course, like a minute later, Jamie crawls over to make sure it's really dead, and of course, it grabs her. She falls in the pool, and it grabs her back into the pool. Right?
No, that's
Yeah.
not how what happens
What am I
is
forgetting?
she's in the pool and it starts coming after her. He ends up shooting it in the pool again.
Yeah, what if I'm
Well,
getting?
she's trying to get out.
Yeah.
It grabs her leg,
Yeah, remember?
and she's struggling. He shoots it in the head again.
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then when she crawls over the pool is
It's
when
all blood.
it sees
Okay.
bad CGI blood.
Yeah. So basically, this thing takes 2 headshots, one of which was when it was in the water, and then that seems to have killed it, or at least they think so at that point. It's not coming after, and the pool fills with ghostly blood.
The other thing is we theoretically never see it again, although possibly at the end
well,
there's somebody
that's-
following them when they're
that's what I'm
walking.
getting to.
But before that, like, you theoretically never see it again after the pool fills with blood.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be dead.
True. Well, that's what I'm getting to. The very end of it is showing Jamie and now Paul, her nerdy childhood friend, are together in it. Yeah, they're in a caring relationship, a meaningful relationship, and are walking down the street. And like in the distance, not distorted, but out of focus, is a pedestrian. And I think that's sort of I liked it. Here's why I'm going to give it a good score, Holly. That little moment, that little touch is almost like a John Carpenter thing to me. It could be open-ended, right? They don't make it clear, and it just cuts to credit right after that, and that's the end of the movie. So all that, like the final little fight, like sort of like, to me, I said to you guys, I think at the time, it was like a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of fight, like the setup, etc.
I think it was more of
or that too, yeah.
And fight at the end where the kids are getting together to like.
Right, you're right about that. That's
the first part of it when they're getting like the slingshot and all that. It felt very childish in a way, and very kind of like. Again, they're thinking outside the box.
Well, that's what
for the first time in the film.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I got. You're right. I think it's sort of half that and half Nightmare on Elm Street. So it's on Elm Street, I guess, or the matchup. But no, you're right. I agree with that. So given all that, and especially like I always am going to be like more biased towards like an open-ended ish ending, like a question mark kind of thing. That's just me. I enjoy that as a narrative device, even though it may be overused sometimes. But I think it was used well enough here, and I liked the final shot, and I'm going to probably give it credit on that.
I did like that final little like walking down the street shot where it's like unclear whether they're being followed or not. Oh, also, do we mention that the guy that her boyfriend goes to a hooker to try and like pass it on through the sex trade?
You're right. I forgot about that.
Basically,
insert that in there. So after they shoot it in the pool,
which is probably something the first guy that got this should have done, or chick, whoever, should have tried. Maybe that is what happened, but who knows? But like, this seems like maybe it's kind of fucked up, but the first thing that I would think of is like, go find the first person that will have sex with me, no questions asked. And that's pretty much the easiest way to do it. Go down, past 8 Mile.
All right.
Find a hooker.
You're right. You guys are right, though. That was a little thing they included that we forgot to mention.
I'm really torn again on how to rate this. Because, again, it has that, that Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors quality. It has the it quality to it. But I really was annoyed by the ending.
Underwhelmed, maybe, at least, to say the least.
I agree.
I expect something different. Because generally those 80s movies had underwhelming finales to them.
And so did this one.
Yeah,
in a way. Yeah, I agree with that, but I think it was still pulled off the way. Again,
perhaps not the
bias.
best way to homage something is to do something completely, as badly as everything else did.
Repeat it.
It had some ideas in it, but I just felt the execution here
fair enough
wasn't. Maybe it was partly the acting in it that but there was just so much that seemed casual without explanation and
glossed over, I guess. Yeah.
The one friend getting shot in the leg, it was how casual everyone treated that.
Right.
I thought a cool idea was that it was her father who was hunting her down.
It took the form of her father.
Right. At some point, it took the form of her father, and he was standing naked on the roof.
Yeah, but and her being and then she was hesitant to tell. What does it look like?
She didn't want to tell her sister.
Yeah.
So there's some clever ideas there. I just felt that it ran out of steam almost, or the charm it had wore off by this point. It was
wearing thin by that time. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure it ever picked up enough storytelling capital to spend those good moments on me as effectively as they could have been. That's kind of what you need. You need the build up to have moments like that and make them as effective as possible.
Based off your point there, it was for instance, when they're coming up with ways to defeat this, you saw the progression of their chain of thought that led
to their decisions
on how to confront this creature. You never get that in this story. They just decide to, of all the places to go to the pool.
No, they said it was the first place to be kissed or whatever. They glossed over that detail of the minor.
Why we're going to try to electrocute this thing? There's no reason that this there's you never.
True.
You never
you're right. You're right about that.
That's into the thought process of this, and that bothered me. And then it seems random.
Right.
Fair enough. I guess for me, it's a very distant cousin's brother's former roommate of a thing ending, and I love that was probably the best example of doing that kind of ending. Even though this one, of course, is not close to that, it attempted it, and I like I said, I'm a sucker for that device, and I think it did it decently enough. Even for, again, as you guys said, and I mostly agree, it's somewhat flat, standard at the end.
It didn't earn that ending.
Right.
I think it did. I think it did enough. So I'm gonna give it a 1 on it, though.
I'm going to give this a 0.
All right. I think it sounds like E's going to be 0 as well.
Yep.
And Ian also gets to go on to themes now, sir. Here we go. His favorite thing to address.
So back in the 80s, there was a
Throwback.
a tradition amongst horror movies that they had this like theme of sexuality, and in a sense, kind of a negative portrayal of it. The hero was usually the heroine was usually virginal. Like the kind of more promiscuous friends of hers would be killed by, like, again, being pierced, like a very phallic imagery.
Thanks, Freud. Yes, but you're right.
Here, they're kind of, it's a version of that for the modern day, where the idea of like chastity has lost its like virtue in our society.
Effectiveness as that, yeah.
Which I don't like think that's a negative thing for society. But so here it's
just the fact
it's
of the
kind of
matter is
updating that concept that casual sex is like she goes on a date with this guy, has sex in the back of his car, and ends up getting basically a supernatural sexual transmitted disease. She has sex with her kind of stoner bad boy like neighbor, who is promiscuous on his own. Like immediately after having sex with her and taking the thing, he has sex with another girl.
Or it's implied, heavy implied.
It's not like on screen, but yeah, it's implied.
And then at the end, like, she gets with the guy who's been her childhood friend for a very long time, who actually likes her and is not using her for sex. Although I don't necessarily believe that.
This is so that's such a weird relationship too.
But it's the kind of idealism that I think that people like him think that he is in love with the girl next door who's like beautiful and dumb, like, and that's not true like romance there, but in his mind it is. And I think that this is what the movie is implying, that kind of stable type of relationship is what you don't get STDs that way. So you can see those elements in there, but I think that like this was a kind of love letter to and also to jump back for a second, they remind you about sex constantly throughout this movie. Like it's there's a hospital shot where like a doctor's flirting on a nurse, and then it cuts to like another doctor and another like a changing room together.
They told the story about finding porno mags as a kid, and they find some porno mags. That's true.
Like it's constantly bombarding you in this story. So like the theme is sex, really, and like and when you go into horror, you're dealing with the unknown, and this is a lot of young kids.
Sure, that's true.
Sex is kind of terrifying concept of what could, like, not only pregnancies but sexually transmitted diseases, being used during relationships. Like hell, the first guy brings her to the back of a car, chloroforms her and ties her to a chair, and gives her a supernatural.
Explains the yes. Go on.
So it's a throwback, but it's weird because it's trying to modernize the message. But I don't know if it worked.
And honestly, I think that there is no actual between people that have sex in this movie. There's no like actual decent relationship. Even at the end, I thought that was such a weird
shoehorned in.
No, it wasn't shoehorned in. It was hinted at the entire film.
Oh yes,
but it was such a like weird thing for her to be like, basically at the end like, fine, like it didn't seem like I don't know. It didn't seem like she had any actual feelings for this kid until she fucked him to like get rid of her STD.
In reality, if that regardless of whether they face anything supernatural, if those two got together, it would be a very unhealthy relationship.
Sure.
Because he adores her, and
she doesn't respect him.
She doesn't respect him, and it would be like I would pity him in that relationship.
I pity the nerd who screws Jamie, but they had one after they had sex with each other at the end. Towards the end, they say to each other, "Do you feel any different?" And they both say like, "No, do you?" And he's like, "Not really." So you're right. Like it's sort of like an oddly bittersweet, like somewhat depressing ending, or like I guess we just accept it because this is the best case scenario. But you're right. Like this is probably not going to be a great relationship. They don't like they're not smiling when they're walking down the street. I don't think they're just holding hands, but just like sort of almost dead-eyed about it.
Right.
But I agree. Like yes, of course, sex is a huge theme, and they'll never let you forget this in the movie. I just like, and you said something like, yeah, it's a throwback. So it's sort of like the modern, like, updated viewpoint of sexuality in society, I suppose, blah, blah, blah. And that's all fine, I guess. Like, yeah, it's nice that they try to have it in there and, update it from the 80s style message, if you will, about it to like the reality of modern day young kids, like
I don't know,
young adults having sex.
I don't know. I think that this film also had just like not very deep or thoughtful things to say about sex in our society.
I think it thought
it
did.
tried to, or wanted to,
Right.
at least. Yeah.
And I think like It Follows is the kind of like sense that once you experience it, it's like ever present around you in society or something like that.
Right. Or is this like your sexual history always follows you around, or like I don't
going
know.
for that message.
It kind of felt like I mentioned this earlier, and I'm being a little bit facetious, a little bit, but it seemed kind of like an abstinence like propaganda piece almost. Like, oh, if you fuck somebody, terrible things will happen to you.
Well, that's just our own natural overanalysis, as always. But
the nerdy girl who's reading The Idiot the entire time, which actually
I was going to say, what theme and message is that? I was waiting for you to mention that.
It doesn't seem like she's getting any.
Right.
And she gets shot in the leg.
That's
so
also
like,
true.
like that's not good.
Everybody's screwed, I guess.
But she's also the most nonchalant, if you recall. Maybe we're jumping the gun on secondary characters.
It honestly doesn't seem like getting shot was such a big deal for her.
Oh,
to
But everything, she's like, hey, why don't you guys come in the water when the thing's hunting them? And like, yeah, she's running away with them too. But then she's in the car, like, and half the scenes or so, she's like sleeping. Yeah, like they're like, doing whatever, and she's just like passed out next to him or on the bed or whatever.
Well, I guess she represents. I can't even think of the main character from The Idiot.
Sure.
In a sense that innocence and in a world of corruption.
Intellectual innocence will save you from supernatural monsters, the corruption, maybe.
But it won't save you from being shot by your friends.
Yeah, your friends, your ineffectual friends, incompetent friends are still going to fuck you over. Maybe that's another theme.
Even if you're safe from demons, humanity will always screw you.
Sure. Well, I still think it touched upon enough of what it may have wanted to, while not as deep or like as meaningful as it possibly could have been. It's still like, I don't know, again, like I said about the body, decent enough it's stitched together well enough that I think if indeed that's a theme, which it clearly is, it's fine. I'm going to give it probably a 1.
I feel like it thought it had something to say.
More clever than it was, but still.
But I think that it was not only ineffectual at that, but kind of had like unhealthy things to say about sex. So I'm going to give this a 0.
Scott, before you give it the 1 officially, though, I want you to consider this.
Okay.
It's another more recent movie. Teeth. I think Teeth had the exact same kind of message as this movie
similar,
wanted to, and I think it pulled it off much better.
I like Teeth, the movie, as a quick personal disclosure. Yes, I thought it was a good horror movie. I agree that it pulled it off better, but that's not to say that It Follows is bad. Just it was.
But I think thematically, it was more effective.
It addressed. No, I agree with that.
The message because I feel that It Follows was very unclear at times.
All right, you know what? You
its
guys may have just turned my tide at the end there, like you both said. I think I will turn it into a 0. In fact, yeah, I think you got me. I wanted to like see the good in it, I guess, but I think overall you just convinced me.
Yes,
Yeah, you guys got me. Good one. Good on you. All right, so we're all going 0s on themes. That brings us to the antagonist, which perhaps is the same thing as a theme, Steve-O.
So I guess the antagonist is either the succubus, or if you want to go to a deeper level, sex itself, I guess.
Yeah. Of course, that's what I had written down as my note.
Which I'm trying to ignore that part because that's just stupid, I think. But as far as the succubus went, like as far as being a scary horror movie monster, I think it was done pretty well. It's always this like slow creeping thing following you, very like Terminator-ish, but for sex.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that is part of the movie that they did a very good job on.
I agree with that. So yeah, as facetious or not as sex as the enemy may be, personified as in the movie by the succubus, I think that they did a good job using the horror elements like that you expect and have seen, but in imparting them into this movie. Like one of my favorite parts or scenes of that was when they're in Jamie's room and her 2 friends come in and we're like, well, it's going to be behind the door, but it moved in like very quickly and like almost like liquidy, and she immediately screams and runs out. That was a well done shot, I think, horror wise. So yeah, as personified by the monster shown to us in the film, I also agree it was pretty well done.
The only issue I had with the monster is the one scene where it's on the roof randomly.
Yeah.
That did not play by
They didn't
its own
explain that
rules
rule.
there.
Right. How did it get up there? Like,
I think that the monster was actually very effective. It was almost kind of reminiscent to me of like how the original showings of Michael Myers, where you'd see him in the distance, like stalking.
It was definitely an homage and reference to that kind of stuff.
So I am going to add another antagonist here: absentee parents.
All right. Well, that's sort of back from the 80s.
So her mom is never around, but it's implied that
She's
she has
working a lot, yeah.
that she has like a decent relationship with her mom, both in the beginning and at the end.
But if the mother was around more and didn't have a deadbeat father or whatever, or a dead father,
Might be dead. I think he's probably dead.
She would have been able to tell her daughter about finding her white.
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, you're right. You're right. The mom probably would have stopped her 21-year-old daughter from having sex.
Well,
19.
that's somewhat funny.
either
But
way.
I don't know if I fully buy into it. But I'm giving the monster a 1 at least.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I'll give the monster 1 as well.
All right. That brings us to the protagonist, and it's on to me. I think this answer is fairly clear. I won't have to say much. She was the standard horror protagonist, and I didn't particularly like her as a character. Am I supposed to? Yes, I probably am. But again, because we know the nature of the whole setup, certainly we've seen better ones, even within you playing all the tropes and cliches and characterization straight. So Jamie was flat, and her friends were even, of course, flatter than that. So I don't know. I probably am not gonna.
I don't
give her
actually
credit.
have a problem with her because she was a standard scream queen.
Yeah, I guess.
there.
But
So I thought that the actress that played her did a good job.
she was fine. But again, she was working within a narrow range. Of course,
It wasn't a
character.
blow your mind acting job, but she did a good job. Her character was too fucking stupid to live, though.
Yeah.
I can't believe she lived throughout this whole movie.
Well,
The only reason it happened is because the writer wrote it like
That's why I'm
that,
giving
you
it
know?
0. Yeah, she did a good job with what she had, and what she had was what the writer said to do, and
Right.
some of it
But
was
again,
not great.
Do you view it through kind of
Right.
the modern day lens, or do you view it through the intention of this being because she was all of
Right, she hit all those notes.
80s
That's true.
horror scream queen?
I think I'll view it this way. Where I gave it credit on the body floor, I'm taking away credit for the protagonist as specifically portrayed in the film.
I don't know. I just didn't like the thing. I actually didn't mind the character, except for I hated all the things that she did when she was in danger. So
is that part of her character you're saying?
yeah, I think it is. I didn't mind her interactions with other people and things like that. I didn't think they were amazing or anything, but I thought she was probably did a better job than pretty much everybody around her.
I have to give her credit for at the end of the movie, she's on the beach and she sees 3 guys boating in the distance, and it's implied she swims out to the boat and does her business in order to not be followed anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So for all her stupidity throughout the thing,
That was a
good
one she did. I guess.
ballsy move.
I don't know if that
I
was
guess.
smart or just you're at the end of your rope and
Desperation.
this is
move.
it's I feel like that's what they set up. She slept on the hood of her car the night before
In a forest.
She sees a way to not have to do that anymore possibly, and goes and takes it. And also that is implied that that's what she did, but the monster comes back pretty quickly after that, if I recall.
Yes, well, I pointed that out. I think we all did it. The implications are the monster just killed them on the boat and got back. That's when we started talking about the rules of the water thing and so forth. So I don't know. It filters into
No, we were talking about the water way before that.
right, but one made us
we
question
started
even
talking
more
about the
so.
rules of 3 guys on a boat.
Yes.
So
yes, and etc. But so you're giving her credit on the protagonist at the end of the day.
You guys go first. I will.
Right. Well, I answered. I don't think she's strong enough for me to give her a 1 in this spot. Whereas I gave the overall body of the story credit enough to.
I'm going to give it a 1 because of intention, and I think she was
That's somewhat fair.
who she was supposed to be, and perhaps even slightly better than average.
Right.
I'm going to give this one a 0.
Alrighty. So her now Scooby-Doo's scrappy gang secondary characters. What you got?
So there's not many characters in this movie. You have the initial jock Jeff, I believe his name was, who gives her the succubus STD, and he was fine. I like kind of how paranoid he was, even and he showed that even when you pass this along, it never quite leaves you.
Right.
You're still
Possibly in the
paranoid
danger zone.
because it's true. One day it just could start following you again, and you see someone slowly walking up towards you. You don't know if it's a monster or not. So I think that was I think he introduced a number of deeper concepts.
It's a good psychological paranoia, fear fuel. Yeah.
But it was very brief, and the rest of the movie didn't really explore any of that. You had of the Scooby-Doo gang, you have Shaggy. I guess that guy would be Fred. So
Bender?
The jock would be Fred. So Bender would be Shaggy, and the nerdy kid would be Scooby Doo. Shaggy, like he was the character from Breakfast Club. Like he wore the jean jacket and kind of a badass and a little bit. I think he was a little bit older than.
Yeah, it's implied he was like they were like 21. I think they said that outright. So he's probably like anyway.
So he's a little bit more worldly, and he ends up having sex with the main character, ends up getting killed. His death felt very much like Nightmare on Elm Street with Johnny Depp's kind of character. Yeah. You have Velma, who's this nerdy girl reading
the idiot, passing out, but always passing out, surrounded by a bunch of snacks as well.
You have the sister Kelly, who just plays the worried sister, and like she has no. I can't think of
that's her entire character. Yes.
Yeah.
And then you had the nerdy kid, and this is why I'm not going to give this a good score, because he was painful to watch, and maybe it was because it was honest and like. Perhaps I was like him when I was younger, kind of like that weird kid, like desperate kind of. It just made me very uncomfortable to watch him on screen, and it's nothing to do with his performance. It's the character
itself.
Sure. Like he wants to be the hero, but so many great there's such greater guys. I don't know. I just either they were flat characters or they were painful.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I'm going to say. That's true. The thing is, like I'm going to give it a bad score, but in our grand tradition, I want to give it a 1 because Velma was a cute brunette with glasses, but was she a good character? No. And everyone else, again, was pretty much 1.5 dimensional, I guess. So, like, again, as we said, at the most. So they served their stock horror purposes as characters, but no more, and, that's it. And none of them were stood out. They just, like, were there to be the stock characters that they needed to be in the framework of a horror movie like this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ian. The nerdy kid was really awkward. It was painful to watch. Like, it was really like annoying to watch, and like I think that I would agree. Like I saw pieces of my younger self, and I felt like, God damn, this is annoying to watch.
I kick my own ass.
The stupid ass things that I used to think and do, and like be like when you're a teenager and you're just
or 21.
Or 20, or however old when you.
I don't think they were.
I think those kids were younger.
Yeah.
I think her sister was definitely younger, and I think that kid was the same age as her sister.
Possibly.
It seemed that he was always hanging out with her.
Jamie was drinking in a bar with Jeff. I
think Jamie was 21.
Yeah. All right. Let's not get caught up on it.
Anyway.
Late high school, early college.
Right. Like, I don't know. It just it's painful to go back and like look at those things and see how annoying and like just.
But it's an honest. I think he was the most honest character in the movie, and that being painful to watch, like, and the fact that it.
But perhaps not the character that should be like the quote unquote winner at the end. Like he's the one that kind of got what he wanted more than anybody else.
It was the worst possible message.
Right. I don't think that kid through his like the way that he acted this entire movie should have been the one to like walk away with the girl. Like
he's not Scooby Doo. He's Scrappy Doo.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's perfect. Yeah. You're just jealous because you're saying he doesn't deserve that girl. Anyway.
Yeah, he should have ended up with Velma.
No, maybe. But you guys are right. Like I agree with you guys, of course, that they're all just flat and there's not much to them, so they didn't add much. They just served the role they needed to serve, and pretty much it. Right?
Yeah.
So
pretty much.
I think that means a 0 from us all. Yes. All right. Well, another favorite subject of yours, Steve-O, especially this film, dialogue.
It was bad.
Yep.
That's pretty much all I gotta say.
Agree.
I don't remember. If they had said "It Follows," I don't know if I would have remembered it, but I don't think they do at all in the entire movie.
They got close. It keeps following you. They don't quite title drop it, but it's there more or less.
I mean, it wasn't good dialogue. It just wasn't good. It wasn't delivered well. It wasn't written well.
Here's the thing, right? Again, as we said, this is standard horror-ish movie dialogue, but there weren't even any like good little jokes, little gags, or anything. Like they didn't even like subvert anything like that. They just gave you the matter-of-fact stuff that you need, and everyone said the matter-of-fact things that they needed to do in that situation, and sometimes made dumb decisions while poorly explaining them anyways.
Right. I'll say most of the dialogue wasn't, like, cringeworthy.
No, it was just...
But it was just not good.
It was bog standard, like, serviceable, but no standout.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy who directed this also wrote this?
Yes.
I think we're almost done with dialogue here, so I'm going to preempt my style. Discussion with he had a good eye for cinematography.
I agree with that.
But he has no ear for human discussion.
Right.
And yeah, some of it might have been a little bit painful, but really it's completely like bland and
forgettable.
I mean,
Yeah.
So.
It's cookie cutter, so
Going to 0 on that.
zeros all across. All right. Well, you just mentioned it, E. So we're on to style, and I'll expand upon what you said. I agree. I did like many of the shots. It was shot in a style that gave a number of them gave you a good sense of paranoia of like the creepiness factor of being followed by something. And again, like when they showed them on the various facets that it appeared as, I thought that was really well done. Like a lot of times they did a nice little recurring thing where it'd be in the background, or they did like nice subversion where they're all sitting around in a circle and one guy's like, "You see that? Everyone see that girl?" And they're like, yeah, we see her. Like, that was probably like one of the standouts of it. Like, but no, many like it's sort of they do a couple of like 360 sweeping around shots. So like the street is the same, and then across the street is the same, and then back. Oh no, and then it's there, and a couple of the montages like when they're driving. Again, it's standard, but it was framed very well, and I think also the soundtrack added a lot to it. Like you said, it was Twin Peaks style. I said
Twin
Carpenter.
Peaks, half Carpenter.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that. Like again, maybe I'm biased about it, but I think it all came together visually and stylistically, if not in dialogue, in spoken words.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The style was the thing that I enjoyed most about this film. They did a really good job with the cinematography. Everything looked like this kind of decrepit suburbia. And the atmosphere, although they didn't employ like mist or like fog or anything, it felt like that oppressive atmosphere a lot. Yeah.
Exactly.
And even like that goes into like when they go into the rooms and it looks like there's only one way in. This happened a lot in the film, by the way. It looks like there's the only way in is the way they went in.
And you're like, that's one.
And you're
of the
like,
rules.
why would you go into that stupid room when you can't get out? And then it turns out that there's another way out, but they don't show you that until they're leaving.
You're right. That was a pretty
the
nice
room.
touch.
And then the soundtrack I liked a lot, just right from the beginning. I was a big fan of it. I not much to say. I like this good like electronica kind of 80s retro feel. Like it didn't feel like 80s, but it felt like music made now that was trying to feel like the 80s.
Right, in the same way that the film itself was shot and like framed as such.
Right.
The soundtrack matched that.
Right.
You guys did a pretty good job of discussing all the points I wanted on those topics, but I'd like to talk about the horror style in this movie. Of all of the movies we've seen so far for the Halloween episodes, this is really the only one I was actually tense during. They did a very good job of... They used jump scares very effectively here.
And sparingly, I think, too. And
I think there are 3 or 4
probably
throughout the
4
entire...
tops. I think we were trying to count them, but yeah, go ahead.
But there's one part where I was kind of like following along with the movie, and they do a... it's kind of... She's in the bathroom, like you're distracted because she's looking down her underwear. So, like, of course, all my attention is like focused at that, and then like a ball hits the window,
right?
And it actually made me like jump. And afterwards, I was waiting for the next jump scare to happen, so I wouldn't be taken off guard. And because I'm on guard, I'm more like it's a tenser feeling. I'm more invested in the horror aspects. So I was legitimately nervous during certain parts of this movie, and I have to give that full credit. It very much had that feel of that 80s style, like Halloween type horror, where you get the like. There's this great shot where she's being hunted and she steals a car, just ends up crashing it, or steals one of her friend's cars, and she ends up in the hospital and just looking out the hospital door, waiting for the thing to turn the corner and come to her. And it was a beautiful scene because I was like on the edge of my seat, anticipating this creature about to ambush her. So, like, the horror elements were fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree with all that. It's another aspect that they built up the tension and sort of spaced it out enough that did a good job of creating, like you just said, a claustrophobic, paranoid kind of feel and atmosphere, oppressive upon you as an audience member, even. So I think that means we're all giving style A1 here,
Going
sir.
with the 1 there.
All right, and finally, Ian, your final recommendations and impression of It Follows.
I'm uncertain, so I'm going to talk this out. This is a good Halloween movie if you're looking to like something to get scared by. Is it a great horror movie in an intellectual and like mythological sense? No.
Is it amongst the modern classics? Will it be in the future, you think?
But I think this has a time and a place. Again, if you're looking for a collection of movies to go with Paranormal Activity, or like those kind of like scary, like get together with your friends and like get nervous at watching movies, I think this would fit in well with that.
It's a good party Halloween movie, sure.
It has that tension there, and I don't really much get that in horror movie nowadays. So it actually affected me. So I have to give it credit for that.
You make a good point. Like, I was also pretty torn about this one myself, but I think you may have convinced me how I'm going to answer is that I think it deserves a watch. I think it's well done for what it is. Certainly there are way worse ones, and for it being a 2014 movie, like you said, you still like it actually made you feel the tension here and there. And how many movies are able to do that nowadays, even if they're not horror movies? Mm-hmm. So I think I agree with you that it deserves credit on that point, and I think I probably myself would say, yeah, check it out. It's a good movie for that time and circumstance you just laid out. Yes, and it's probably decent even if that's not like particularly your setup. I think it still. I would say, hey, watch it once, and you tell me what you think. But definitely check it out. Don't skip it per se.
I think this the director has a future if he gets himself a screenwriter.
Right.
And I think if he
good way of putting it.
If he had
apologies to him though now. Sure.
A screenwriter who could do better character development, make me care about. But you could say that about most horror movies, though. So, but building tension and effective camera work, this guy was fantastic at it. And for that, like, I expect to see big things from him later on. And I think this is like it shows it's a good starting point.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would say that if you can find a film that this director did, written by someone else, probably check it out.
Okay, fair enough.
However,
good description.
I don't know if I can recommend this. I just didn't. I mean, the style of it may lead me to recommend it. I'm sure, and I know a lot of people like this film. That's the entire reason it was on our list to be watched.
It was a hyped up, like respected, touted as a good modern horror.
But I mean, if I wasn't a big fan of it. It was tense. I will give it that. You're absolutely right. At the same time, I was consistently breaking that tension in myself.
Fair enough.
By just like pointing out the absurdity of like all of the other things that they could have been doing other than what they were doing the entire time. So like it was a type of film that like builds up tension, and then I'm like, well, that's stupid, and then the tension is all released at that point, and then it has to build up tension again, which it does well, but then I can just joke about how stupid it is, and that kind of releases all the tension again. So I think there are a lot of horror films that do it without giving you that out.
Sure.
Or giving you that easy out, or at least for me. So I'm gonna, I don't know. I think I'm gonna give this a 0 on this last question.
Fair enough. All right.
And
Ian, you're giving it a 1.
Check out something else.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Well, that brings us to our final scores here, boys. Ian and I gave it a solid 6, it seems, and Steve-O, you gave it a rather lackluster lower 4, right?
Nope,
3. I'm sorry, 3. Right. So that gives us a total score of 5.
Yes.
Which is pretty much you're right. It's almost a coin flip. Like
that's probably about right.
Yeah, it goes back to everything we actually just covered about it. Is it a should you recommend? Yeah, maybe, or skip it. Like the body was okay, and that's good.
I think it's a very fair.
I think it's very representative of the movie as a whole. So I think we did a good job scoring it. So that'll close it off for our decade retrospective of horror here on MOTS-O-Ween Special 2010 Extravaganza, Monster Mash, and so forth.
And we'll be appearing tomorrow live on YouTube.
Catch us then. We'll be haunting you through your computer.
Where we're going to watch Halloween.
Yes.
That's right.
All right. Well, we'll sign off for now. This is Scott Thurlow saying catch you then.
Have a good one and watch your back.
Jonathan Ian Manzer, and this movie would have been better with Pennywise the Clown. This Saturday we'll be doing a live review of Halloween, the movie, at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our YouTube channel. So please come join us.
This has been Bon Mots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music by Chris Morgan. Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosa. This has been a Lost Cinemas production. All rights reserved.